Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Through the Pages. This is a book that I have had on my list for a while now. As soon as I knew it existed, I was like, whoa, Cleve Jones wrote a book? The Cleve Jones? And if you're saying to yourself, Joe, is this the same Cleve Jones from the Harvey Milk story? It is. That's why I'm fascinated by it. Harvey Milk, I don't have a big list of politicians that I like, but like that man did so much good. We're still experiencing ramifications from the good he did, and Cleve was right in there with him. But what I liked about this book is that it's not how he was adjacent to Harvey. Like Cleve has his own story. He's done so much work before Harvey, with Harvey, and then afterwards too. So this book, like you'd guess from the title, When We Rise, it's all about his life as an activist in the gay liberation movement, and in just general, like kind of a lefty-leaning person fighting for rights. Like there's been a lot to fight for in his lifetime, but definitely was focused in the gay rights movement. So it's basically a whole biography. This is his second book, but the first book was all about the AIDS memorial quilt, which they discuss a lot in here. I do want to read that book, but he said after he wrote that, he was like, that didn't satisfy the itch. There's something I need to tell here that didn't get unearthed in that. And so I'm really glad I read this first, because it makes me want to dive into the other project more. Versus, like, I don't know, maybe it'd be the other way. Like, oh, that guy, I really liked what he did with that project. I want to know more about him. But, like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be reading the other book. He, like a lot of people that were his age, pre-gay rights, grew up thinking, I'm the only person who's like this. Like, I'm alone. No one knows what I'm going through. And he even had a stash of pills for the day he planned to kill himself. Like he was just, that's how this is gonna go. And then I'm trying to think of what magazine it was in, but there was some article in relation to homosexuality that allowed him to say, whoa, I'm not the only one. Until I saw this, I thought I was the only person. And he flushed the pills and he moved on and realized there's something to fight for here. There's more people like me. And that really kind of sets a tone for the whole thing of how grave this fight is, not just for him, but for everyone, and even pre-AIDS epidemic. Like, it's a tearjerker of a book, honestly, and that's me. If you know me, I'm easy to be jerked to tears by emotional things, and because I have no interest in fighting back tears ever, really. So, like, I just let that shit flow, and so, like, it was flowing a couple times during this book. I can't wholly empathize on the homosexuality. Like, it's not, I haven't had to experience the difficulties that come along with that. I am just plain Jane straight. But he's a young man who's just very alone. And that's something I know I can resonate with. And it's not to say that an odd dietary lifestyle is equally alienating, but through not just plant-based, but going raw vegan and then not using alcohol anymore. Like, there are a lot of ways where I feel other from most people around me, most of my friends even. I just feel like I'm in a different world a little bit. And he really balanced helping himself while helping others through this. And that was something that I really admire, how he was able to, like, there were times where it was, super important march going on. And, at this time, I did heaps of work to make this happen, to get everyone here. Like, I'm going to go have sex. I'm leaving. Like, and just, like, I really dig that, to where you can do so much, but also, listen to yourself enough to be like, I need some of my own pleasures. Like, I'm not in there just to fight. Like, at some point, I'm going to do my thing. And it was a really interesting balance, because it can be difficult as you find something that's so engrossing where you put time to anything else and you feel like, oh, damn, I'm not supposed to be doing that. I'm focused on the goal, And it's like, he he balanced it really well, knowing that it was a marathon and not even knowing what the more challenging stages of the marathon to come. Learned I learned about Harvey Milk more in this, but I really liked the position he took that this wasn't his telling of Harvey Milk's story. There's probably a dozen Harvey Milk books out there already, and from the two Gus Van Sant movies, which they kind of go over in here, the making of them, which was really fascinating, and then through this book, little details that were put into the movie that were so specific and gave it so much character, much in the way that Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was written by Stieg Larsson and his partner, and it was really, the coffee shops they're in, the streets they were walking. So when they described it, like, it has that layer to it that can't be faked. And there was something in that Milk movie beyond just the story and the emotion of it all, where it was so thoughtful and detailed, and in some of the ways that the characters talked to one another, little things they said, little personal details that really, like, this wasn't an overly fictionalized version, that movie, and I think that's what hooked me into the story, that it wasn't an overtelling of it or trying to make it seem like it was more than it was. Like, it was one of the bigger political things to happen in that decade. I mean, like, and there was a ton happening, like, I would say one of the bigger domestic things happening, and just on the leaps and bounds he moved things forward, not just being one of the first prominent out of the closet politicians, but the policy he pushed, and not just within gay rights, but in everything, in all human rights and sort of left-leaning politics. And it's not to say, when I say left-leaning, you can't get super deep into economics. I had this discussion with a friend recently who we were talking about left-leaning people, and he's like, yeah, but I mean, she's still pro-free market. It's like, at a city level, I don't know how much we can do on that, but like, yeah, it was very interesting to see people who have political ideas similar to mine fighting and not just fighting, but organizing. And that was something that he really spoke of a lot in here, of how he organized people ahead of big instances happening, but then also when he knew there was going to be a big response to something, mostly in a potentially negative way, how he was able to guide that feeling and that mass of people. And, the old phrase was, we're not going to destroy our own neighborhood. So we'd get them out of the Castro and guiding people towards something, march until they just are done marching, but just don't stop here. And we're just pissed and going to start going. Like, so they really knew how to handle all of the energy that they were wielding. And that is something that's kind of intimidating on the political side of things, that I look at anyone who organized a march this summer and in the delicate way you had to handle that, knowing it could go bad, and rightfully so, because people are fucking pissed. But to be able to know that your movement needs to last a long time, and faltering now will hinder it in a major way. It's like, yes, we are heated. Yes, we need to let them know we're heated. But it has to be done in a way where we continue. And so his ability to organize, not just alongside Harvey Milk, but afterwards, with the AIDS Memorial Quilt, in any capacity really, he did a very good job of maintaining poise without taking his foot off the gas. And as an organizer, that was just really fascinating. I don't say as an organizer like I am. I say he was a fascinating organizer to me, and as someone who would like to be more involved than I currently am, it was a really insightful approach. And I never knew about the AIDS Memorial Quilt. I knew about the epidemic in a peripheral way, but this was probably the deepest learning I'd done on it. And it was a lot to process, to just, we think of what's happening right now with COVID, and it's every TV screen, it's everything, every politician, we need to help these people. this was happening, but it was just in the gay community. They weren't getting much help because of that. And it's just heartbreaking. And the numbers that they were losing every month, and to just be abandoned was just so shameful. And I realize it's past now, and we're different now, and politicians have more awareness of it, but I just had so much disdain for the people that were turning a blind eye to it, and they caught their eye with AIDS Memorial Quilt. Prior to, one of the things that I learned was the name for the disease wasn't necessarily going to be AIDS. It was going to be GRIDS, which was gay-related immune disorder syndrome, whereas I'm trying to think of what it was now, advanced immune disorder syndrome, depletion syndrome maybe, but they were literally going to name the disease gay-related immune, like that it had to be it's just those people. And so they fought, not necessarily Cleve per se, but it was fought to take that stigma off of it. And I think without that stigma, people were able to say, okay, this is the disease that's heavily present in our country, we should try to reduce it. Where before, like, they're getting themselves into it. It's not me, my wife's not going to get it. So, and there was a lot of people that just didn't care. And Cleve wanted to draw more attention to this without just, trying to rattle people in a negative way. He began the idea of the quilt, and it was a long stretch just getting the idea rolling, but then as it kept going and kept being added to, and they would roll it out, and they'd come back a year later and roll it out, and it's bigger, and it was such a powerful tool, and it wasn't violent, it wasn't in anyone's face, it was just the mass of the issue displayed in a way that you couldn't not be impacted by. And some of those ideas just cut, like the story of the rainbow flag being designed. They had the pink triangle, which was sort of in the Holocaust of someone who was deemed homosexual or queer, or however they would label it. And they used that, but going forward, we need a symbol, but that comes with so much baggage, that's so much hatred along with it. And the man who designed the gay flag, when they rose two of them on the first day, he said, this is the main thing I'll do in my life. This was the biggest thing. And arguably, yes. Like, it was a really impactful book, and I commend anyone who stood with him when it wasn't hip to do it. Now, to be opposed to gay rights, you're a pretty staunch conservative, just out of step with society person, but it took a lot for the national consciousness to get there. And it'd be easy for all of us to say, I would have been right there with him. I would have been, who knows? I have more gay friends than I can count on two hands right now, and I shudder to think that anyone was fighting against them, and still is. But I'm glad that the fight is not so prevalent now, that they can be a little bit more at ease. And it's horrifying that it took the AIDS epidemic for gay rights to be legitimized, or for them to have to go off of the back of that to say, look, we've been dealing with hell on a policy level, on a disease level, on a societal level, and that seemed to be a turning point where I think a lot of people in the movement didn't think in their lifetime they would get it to that point, to that level of progression. And to read a story like this that does not necessarily have an ending per se, but that it's not so... There are movements now that I don't know we'll ever see the end of, and I don't know where the push for equality or equity in my life when it comes to race will be, but I know in Cleve's lifetime, he moved the ball forward massively, along with all the people that he was impacting and working alongside. But it is a success story to me. This book is a resounding success story. And I'll tell you, there are sadder bits than I mentioned in this video, because I don't want to break down. But I'll leave that to the book, to you. I don't need to tell you every little bits and pieces in there. But there's a lot in there, just as a man's story, as a man who lived through the AIDS epidemic. It's a book with heaviness that's balanced out with Cleve's levity. And I am so grateful to have learned this story through his lens. And I cannot recommend this book highly enough. This is one of the best biographies I've ever read, and I am a biography freak. Yeah. Let that book sink in. Consider getting it. If you're getting involved in politics, want to get a little active, this was insightful and starting groups. And they didn't have the internet then, but they would have this pyramid of, I will call 10 people, and I know that those people have 10 people they'll call. Because, and down and down. But so when it was like, we need to march, we need 1,000 people out here tonight, okay, we know how to do that. And these ways of mobilizing were so inspiring, and to think that they had so much less tools and how effective they were, like, it makes me feel like so much can be done now, and I will lap up any hope like that I can. So if you're have a little emotional capacity to handle some heaviness, but know that it is a hopeful story, When We Rise, Cleve Jones. Can't recommend it highly enough.